In Lesson 1-2, Variables, Expressions, and Properties, you will evaluate expressions and identify properties. Don't forget, you can always pause the video if it's going too fast for you. We're going to start out with some vocabulary, just to make sure that you know what it is we're talking about in this lesson. When you see evaluate, that's just another word for solve or do the math. A numerical expression is an expression with only numbers and operations. A variable is a letter used to represent a number. And then an algebraic expression is similar to a numerical expression, except for it will contain variables, numbers, and operations. A power looks like this. An expression like 7 to the second power is called a power. In our first example, it says evaluate 6 times the quantity x minus y to the second power if x equals 7 and y equals 4. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to substitute these values in place of the variables. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite the problem. In place of x, I'm going to put 7. In place of y, I'm going to put 4. And then put the squared. Now you're going to use the order of operations to evaluate or solve. 7 minus 4, we're going to do that first because that's in parentheses. 7 minus 4 is 3. So we're going to rewrite the problem as 6 times 3 to the second power. Next, after parentheses, remember PEMDAS? I'll put that up here so we remember. After parentheses, it's going to be exponents. So 3 to the second power, remember, is 3 times 3. 3 times 3 is 9. This 6 right next to the parenthesis means multiply. So you could have either left a parenthesis around the 9 or replace it with a multiplication sign. 6 times 9 is 54. Right, our next example, g squared minus 2g minus 4 if g equals 5. That means I'm going to put in 5 for g. 5 squared minus 2 times g. So either a multiplication sign or the parentheses. In place of g, we're going to put a 5 and then minus 4. Now using the order of operations, we are going to first use or solve this piece right here. 5 squared is 5 times 5, which is 25. Rewrite the rest of the problem. Next thing that we would do using PEMDAS would be multiplication and division from left to right. And we have multiplication right here. So I'm going to rewrite the problem. 25 minus 10, because 2 times 5 is 10, minus 4. And last, we're going to add and subtract from left to right. We're just going to go ahead and do 25 minus 10 minus 4. 25 minus 10 is 15. 15 take away 4 is 11. In example 3, it's supposed to have a division sign there. The fraction bar is also means to divide. So I'm going to just rewrite this problem as 4 plus 6 times m, and m has a value of 9, over 2n, so 2 times 5 minus 8. This fraction bar is another grouping symbol like parentheses. Basically, it's going to have you do everything on the top everything on the bottom, and then take those two answers and divide. So let's go ahead and simplify the top following the order of operations. We would do the multiplying first. So on the top we have 4 plus 6 times 9, which is 54. And on the bottom, we have 2 times 5, which is 10, minus 8. Now when I actually do 4 plus 54, I get 58. And on the bottom, 10 minus 8 is 2. 58 divided by 2 is 29. All right, the last thing we're going to do is talk about properties. The commutative property means that you can take and switch the order around in an addition or multiplication problem, and you would get the same answer, such as 6 plus 1 is the same thing as 1 plus 6. And 7 times 3 is the same thing as 3 times 7. This only works for addition and multiplication. It does not work for subtraction or division. You won't get the same answer if you switch the order in those two operations. So that, again, that's called the commutative property. I remember it because I think of the word commute, and when someone commutes, they drive maybe from home to work or from work to school. They're moving from one place to another, and the A and the B switch places or commute or move from place to place. Next up, we have the associative property. Again, this is only for addition and multiplication. The associative property means you can change the grouping or what you do first in the problem when it comes to addition and multiplication, and you will still get the same answer. So, for example, in this problem, if I add the 3 plus the 8, I get 11, and 11 plus 2 is 13. Or I could add the 2 and the 3 first and get 5, and 5 plus 8 is 13. I get the same thing either way. That works for addition and multiplication. I remember this one because I think of associative property as who the numbers are associating with or hanging out with in parentheses. Here, the 3 is hanging out with the 8, and on this side, the 3 is hanging out with the 2. If you're changing who's hanging out with who or who's associating with who, it's the associative property. You can do that in addition and multiplication only. Next up, we have distributive property. Distributive property means that if you have a number on the outside of parentheses like this, where you have an addition or a subtraction problem, what you do is you distribute or multiply everything in the parentheses by that number on the outside. So in this example, it's 4 times 6, 4 times 6, plus 4 times 2. 4 times 2 is 8. And then you would add those two answers together. Identity property is when you add 0 to something, you get what you started with, or when you multiply by 1, you get what you started with. So in question or example 4, it says name the property shown by the statement 2 times the quantity 5 times n equals 2 times the quantity 2 times 5 times n. Well, it's not going to be the commutative property because the numbers did not move. It's 2, 5n, 2, 5n. They stayed in the same spot. But I did change who the 5 was hanging out with. At first it was hanging out with n, now it's hanging out with 2. If I change what is being grouped together, that's the associative property. Next example, 42 plus x plus y equals 42 plus y plus x. Notice the x and y switched places. since they moved, that's the commutative property. And at the end here, we have 3x plus 0 equals 3x. When you add 0 to something, you get what you started with. That is the identity property.